This whole process was a wonderful exploration that gave us the opportunity to learn the other practitioner's language. Me as a physician, as a board-certified internal medicine specialist, trying to learn the language of Chinese medicine was quite a struggle, or learning Ayurvedic medicine or Tibetan medicine, or of all the different kinds of styles out there. So we had a period of a couple of years where we did what you said, show and tell.
Oh, and then the fun thing was when we had the symposium and everybody got involved and people were doing skits and singing and doing chants and talking about their different philosophies, and this is where we learned about the difference between curing and healing and disease care as opposed to like person-centered care. And what else did we learn?
There was a lot about the role of spirit and healing. We were really looking at holism, looking at the principles of what health medicine would eventually be. We're looking at the integrative nature, the advantage of working together, looking at the whole person, and doing it from the style from which the person wants it, and also looking at prevention.
One of the things that I found interesting was that many times when you would get together several different types of healthcare practitioners to discuss a particular problem, many times they came up with the same conclusions.
I'd say most of the time that's what did happen. It was surprising to me, because in my arrogance as an internist, and having learned what I'd learned in my medical training, where there wasn't much respect for complementary and alternative therapies, and when I didn't understand the language, I was very hesitant to believe that that could actually happen. But it did. All I had to do was let the process unfold by itself, and found that most of the time, nearly always, working with teams of practitioners was a great advantage for the patient, because there were more options, there were more points of view to be taken, there was less pressure to have to solve problems. And initially we were looking at patients as a group and as a panel at meetings where there might be 150 or 200 people watching. And we'd explore ways that we could see how we could identify the problems and then find solutions. But as we got to working together more, we realized that we needed to learn how to work together in a private setting, in a clinical setting, where we could actually do this.
So you came up with some principles of health medicine, 4 to be exact. So do you want to talk a little bit about some of these principles?
Yeah, I do, for sure. I also want to talk just for a second about the healing circle and how it developed. Because basically what happened there is we got a group of 100 people together. We'd divide up into groups of 10. These are all practitioners. One person would volunteer to be the patient, and the other 9 would work with that person to try and find a solution to their problems. So we practiced that for months, and after we felt like we had a system worked out for it, we then went to the next step, which is where we started inviting patients who were real people who had real problems, and did formal circles where we'd all sit together with the patient. And we did that on 100 patients before we decided to take it into clinical practice. And that was really quite an experience. But it was scientifically based, because it was trial and error, see what works, see what doesn't work, move forward.
It also had to do with how the practitioners got along with one another, because the idea was not to step on somebody else's toes, and the idea was also not to sell your discipline, but just to come up with ideas for the patient to help the patient. And the patients were just so receptive to it and felt so cared for and listened to and loved, really. I remember going to one at the end that we had some wonderful, I forget exactly what we did. We kind of like all went and ended up hugging her, but I don't think that happened at any of the other meetings.
It happens at some of them.
But it was just a feeling at the moment, you know, and it was just so healing.
Well, there's a whole process that occurs in a healing circle. The first 30, 40 minutes, okay, of the 2-hour healing circle is each practitioner talking about what their discipline can offer. And they do that in a way that is just open and clear, and in the presence of all the other doctors or practitioners that are there. Then something magical happens after you finish the academic part of it. We shift from information exchange to connection. And it's that connection with the patient that does the healing part. The curing part is taking care of the symptoms and doing the academics. The healing part is making people learn from their illness and help move them along their spiritual path.
And there's so many ideas that are offered that one of the things that's really nice is the patients get to take home a tape recording of the event. So, or I don't know if you
We
want
do
to call
CDs
it an
now.
event, but anyway, the situation.
Yeah.
And so they can take it home later and look at it and listen to it, because it's an awful lot to absorb.
When you listen as a third party, it's different than being in the hot seat. Keeping in mind that there's always an advocate there for the patient who is supporting and taking care of that person and making sure that the questions that are asked are not too invasive. So it's a wonderful thing that we brought into clinical practice now that I think is a model for healthcare of the future. Now, you asked me about the 4 principles of health medicine. Basically, we're looking at the guts of what we're really doing in health medicine. One is to take an integrative approach. Second is to look at the whole person. Third, we want to look at the person's problem in the context of what the person wants to look at. So if I'm an internist and they want Chinese medicine, we don't shove pills down their throat. We send them to the Chinese medicine doctor if we can. And fourth, we do prevention rather than work on repairing people's problems when the horse is out of the barn.
Okay, so let's start with integrative practice. We've kind of been talking about that a bit.
Okay, so why wouldn't you want all the options that you can possibly have to help a patient with their problem? It doesn't make any sense for any single discipline, unless they've got a slam dunk case where they can say, I can solve this and it's done. But that doesn't happen with chronic diseases. There's an epidemic of them right now. So there's a kind of openness in health medicine where we respect the views of many different disciplines and work together on a level playing field. And in that way, we have more information, we have more options, more possibilities, and we have better results.
And generally speaking, I think you have kind of like a hierarchy of a way to go about this, where you would start with the non-invasive
the simple things first.
Treatments first, and then move along the line, unless of course it's an emergency and somebody needs medical care,
Well,
like right now.
You always have to use your common sense about what to do. But why would you start with an invasive treatment that can kill you? I mean, talk about the things that we do in Western medicine, put a million people a year in their grave. That's not a small number. And it doesn't mean we don't save a lot more people, but why start with the aggressive stuff, the medicines and the surgeries and the technologies, when you can start with lifestyle changes first?
And why exclude some of these alternative methods, you know?
Well, do the ones that are safe in an order. Lifestyle first. Diet, exercise, stress reduction, sleep, meaningful purpose, weight control, all those things. If for some reason that doesn't solve the problem, and usually, by the way, it does, you can then move on to other therapies that are non-invasive. Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, homeopathy, things, body work, psychotherapy. Those are all non-invasive things that are safe to do.
But this is very difficult, I've noticed, for Western doctors, because they're not real open to alternative methods, and many times claim that they're not scientific.
Well, the way the movement is going with complementary alternative medicine, I mean, we know from the Eisenberg studies that there's a huge shift and we spend now more out-of-pocket dollars on complementary and alternative medicine than we do on mainstream medicine.
So
and there are more visits made to complementary and alternative doctors than there are to mainstream doctors today.
So whether the mainstream doctors approve of it or like it, or
it's going to happen anyway,
are ignorant about what the other disciplines do, it's happening. Yeah. It's
so
happening.
why don't we be scientific about it
And work together?
Yeah, what a concept.
And support the studies maybe from NIH.
Yeah, do more research. So we've got lifestyle, then we have non-invasive therapies, then we should be looking at supplements and herbs, because they're about 1,000 or 10,000-fold safer than medicines are. And when those three don't work, then go to medicines, and that doesn't work, then we're talking about surgeries and technology. So that's the order that I think most rational people would agree is the way we should approach healthcare problems.
So often we think of Western doctors as opposed to alternative methods, and many people are too as well. However, on the other side of the coin, there are many people that are so into complementary alternative medicine that sometimes they make choices that are probably not the wisest choices, where maybe they should turn to Western medicine.
Well,
so could you give us a couple of examples? You had a couple of patients that chose complementary alternative methods to an extreme.
You can show examples of all kinds of things. I mean, the mainstream, for cancer, for example, we're doing the mainstream therapies in cancer, and our results aren't that good. We just have to be honest about it. They're not that